That's how the Seattle Times described a little village 7 miles south of North Bend and 35 miles southeast of Seattle. Photos accompanying the May 14, 1915 front page article provided dramatic evidence. Most of the burg's 200 houses were half submerged by slowly rising floodwaters. A company town, Moncton, was established in 1906 by the Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railroad while carving its transcontinental line through Snoqualmie Pass. It thrived on the picturesque Rattlesnake Prairie within the Cedar River watershed. Rail workers soon were joined by utilities employees from nearby Seattle water and hydroelectric dams. By 1909, the town boasted a grocery, hotel, saloon, and 30-student school. The town, less than 3 miles from Cedar Lake, Seattle's primary water reservoir, was euphoniously renamed Cedar Falls. It must have seemed an idyllic spot to plant roots. In 1912, City Light began building an imposing masonry dam intended to further harness Cedar River waters to supplement Seattle's increasing electrical needs. Cue ominous music. Consulting geologists cautioned that surrounding valleys were comprised of porous glacial moraine unsuitable for water containment. But their warnings were overruled by J.D. Ross, Seattle's superintendent of lighting. Cedar Falls paid the piper. Soon after completion of the masonry dam in early 1915, springs erupted from surrounding hills and seeped up from the formerly dry prairie. By summer, all but 2 families had departed their flooded homes and were living in boxcars or makeshift houses above the rising water line. Initially, Seattle Mayor Hiram Gill denied responsibility, blaming the flooding on natural causes. After months of dithering, wiser heads prevailed. The town was condemned, and its dispossessed residents compensated for their losses. Amy LaBarge, Seattle's Watershed Management Division Director, has watched Rattlesnake Lake rise and fall for decades. In December, after months of drought, the lake's water levels dropped to the lowest she's seen. Our summers are definitely getting longer and warmer, and therefore drier, she says. A trained forest ecologist, LaBarge notes that volatile and extreme weather patterns are associated with increasing frailty of the forest ecosystem. Over the last few years, we're seeing alarming waves of tree mortality, she says. Multiple species have become highly susceptible to things that wouldn't normally kill them. How then to manage future water supply in a climate-changing world? Humans will have to learn to be very, very careful with how we use non-renewable resources like water, LaBarge says. We must conserve, not just for people, but for salmon and wildlife and all the other beings that call this place home. In our first then photo, Moncton, Cedar Falls, is shown half submerged by the rising waters of Rattlesnake Lake on May 14, 1915. After Seattle condemned the town, its residents were paid a total of $47,658.03 for their land and property. In our second then photo, during the gradual inundation, a young family returns to its home to retrieve possessions on June 20th, 1915. Several structures were relocated. The flood claimed one victim, 6-year-old Mary Francis, who, reported the Seattle Post-Intelligencer, got beyond her depth while wading. Nearly now, boys play along the then-swollen lake shoreline in April 2022. Amy LaBarge, Seattle's Watershed Management Division Director, notes one possible origin of the name rattlesnake. For millennia, this was a camas prairie where native people gathered, harvesting the roots for food. When the dried seed pods shook in the wind, they sounded like rattlesnakes. In our first now photo, Ethan Sherrard perches on newly revealed foundations of a Moncton Cedar Falls house, of which little remains but a toppled riverstone chimney. In our second now photo, lining the cracked lake bed, our 110-year-old fence posts.